Few cases of serial killing in the UK have horrified the British public as deeply as that of the sadistic couple who became known as the Moors murderers. For 2 years they hunted down innocent youngsters, tortured and killed them for pleasure, and buried the bodies on a vast stretch of Pennine moorland that lies between the counties of Lancashire and Yorkshire. The dominant member of this lethal partnership was Ian Brady, born 1938. His willing accomplice was Myra Hindley, 4 years his junior. They met in 1961 when both were working for a Manchester chemical company and soon became lovers. Brady, with a minor record for assault and theft, had ambitions to become a bank robber, but on July 12, 1963, he told Hindley that he had decided to commit the perfect murder. In his mind, the plan was simple and infallible. Hindley would cruise the streets of suburban Manchester in a borrowed van, while Brady followed on his motorcycle. When he saw a possible victim, he would flash his headlight, and Myra would stop and lure their prey into the van. Soon, Brady spotted a girl whom he recognized, 16-year-old Pauline Reed. Hindley knew the girl's mother, and Pauline was picked up on the pretext that Hindley had lost an expensive glove and would give her some pop music records if she would help to find it. Pauline was bound for a Saturday night dance, but good-naturedly she agreed. Hindley drove to a secluded spot on the edge of Saddleworth Moor, northeast of Manchester, and Brady arrived behind the van on his motorcycle. Myra introduced him as her boyfriend, and he led Pauline off onto the moor to start the search. For what follows, we have to rely upon Hindley's confession some 24 years later. Brady returned to the van and told her to come with him. She saw Pauline lying on the ground, her skirt pulled up and her underwear in disarray, bleeding to death from her slashed throat. Producing a spade that he had left earlier at the site, Brady buried the girl in a makeshift grave. Back home, the couple shared the tasks of destroying the evidence. Brady burned the blood-stained clothes he had been wearing, cleaned the spade, and disposed of the knife he had used. It was not until November that Brady had the urge to kill again. On November 23rd, the pair again hired a van and drove around for several hours before selecting 12-year-old John Kilbride, who was buying biscuits from a stall. Brady invited the boy into the van, and tragically, he accepted. Once again, and weten, they drove out to the moors to look for a lost glove. According to Hindley's account, Brady sent her away while he tried first to stab the youngster and then strangled him with a piece of string. After sexually assaulting the dead child, Brady buried the body. A major police investigation was mounted after John Kilbride's disappearance, but despite extensive inquiries, no clues were found. It later transpired that the search for his body had been called off only a mile from where he lay in a shallow grave. On June 16, 1964, in a mini pickup that they now owned, the couple once again set out on the hunt and soon spotted 12-year-old Keith Bennett. He readily agreed to go with them to help shift some heavy boxes from a shop. As before, they drove out to the moors where Brady strangled Keith with string, sexually assaulted the body, and buried it in a deep hole. He also took photographs which he developed at home and showed to his lover. Many years later, she told detectives, "The boy was lying on his back, there was blood on him, so I wouldn't look closely. I couldn't say whether he was alive or dead when the picture was taken." By December 24th, Brady's bloodlust had returned. Hindley, wearing an ill-fitting black wig to disguise her bleached blonde hair, accompanied him to a Christmas fair where they found 10-year-old Leslie Ann Downey, who had become separated from her two brothers. The couple were carrying boxes that looked like Christmas presents. Hindley dropped the parcels on the ground, asking Leslie to help her pick them up and carry them to their car. Years later, Hindley said, "She went with us like a lamb to the slaughter." What followed was eventually to bring hardened police officers to tears. In the couple's bedroom, Brady had set up his camera and lights and a tape recorder. There he forced Leslie to strip and pose naked for pornographic photographs while he tape recorded her terrified cries before raping and strangling her. It had snowed heavily during the course of the evening, and after trying to reach the moors with Leslie's tiny corpse, Brady and Hindley were forced to turn back and return the next day, when she was buried like the others. Myra Hindley had a younger sister, 19-year-old Maureen, who had married 17-year-old David Smith. The two couples spent much time together, and David, a juvenile delinquent, greatly admired Brady. The older man possessed guns and took him out on the moors to practice with them, bragging about the robberies he was going to commit. Brady decided that he would gain complete power over David by making him an accomplice to murder. On October 5, 1965, Hindley brought David Smith back to her home while Brady picked up a young apprentice, Edward Evans. Sitting in the kitchen with a glass of wine, Smith suddenly heard terrified screams coming from the living room and Hindley shouting, "Dave, help him!" Rushing into the room, he found Brady raining frenzied blows with a hand axe on Evans's head. It was a horrible scene. The lad was screaming and trying to get away. Ian just kept hitting him terrible blows on the head, neck, and shoulders. I was frightened to death. My stomach was churning. There was blood everywhere, on the walls, the fireplace, all over. Finally, Brady strangled Evans with a length of electric flex, remarking, "Well, it's done. It's the messiest yet." He told Smith to return next day to help dispose of the body, but the horrified teenager rushed home and roused his wife Maureen. In the early dawn light, they left their home, in terror that Brady might have followed them, and telephoned the police, who arrived a few minutes later to pick them up. After Smith had gasped out his night's experience, officers immediately went to the Brady house. Locked in an upstairs bedroom was the slaughtered body of Edward Evans. Close by was the axe in a brown paper bag and a box containing 2 fully loaded handguns. Brady was arrested at once and charged with murder. Hindley was taken in for questioning, but it was 5 days before she too was charged. The house was searched from top to bottom. Detectives found a large collection of photographs, some of Hindley with her pet dogs, some amateurish pornography featuring the couple, and many moorland scenes. They also discovered a notebook with a list of names, one of which was John Kilbride, and a strange tape recording of Myra reading aloud newspaper reports about the disappearance of Leslie Ann Downey to a young girl. Within a day or two, the girl had been identified. She was the daughter of a neighbor, and she told the police that Brady and Hindley had taken her for a car ride to Saddleworth Moor on Christmas Eve, 1964, 2 days before the disappearance of Leslie Ann. She took them to the spot, which was in the area where Smith said he had practiced shooting with Brady. A wide search of that part of the moor was organized, with 150 police officers and dogs. On October 16th, Leslie Ann's grave was found. She was naked, her clothes buried at her feet. But would it be possible to prove that Brady and Hindley were responsible? 2 days later, an officer flicking through a book belonging to Myra found 2 left luggage receipts hidden in the spine. They were for suitcases lodged at Manchester Central Station, and when the cases were recovered, they yielded a mass of incriminating evidence. There were bludgeons, wigs, masks, spare handgun ammunition, and books about torture. There were also more photographs of Myra in obscene poses, and others of her on the moors. However, most horrific of all, there were photographs of Leslie Ann, naked and gagged with a handkerchief, suffering unspeakable sexual abuse, and a spool of tape. It ran for 13 minutes, recording the pitiful cries of the 10-year-old child as she pleaded for her life. On October 21st, police searchers found the grave of John Kilbride, some 400 yards from that of Leslie Ann, and they then realized that one of the photographs in Brady's collection showed Myra sitting on it with her dogs. Brady and Hindley were both charged with 3 murders, those of Edward Evans, John Kilbride, and Leslie Ann Downey. The only emotion shown by Hindley was when she was told that one of her dogs was dead. The trial of Brady and Hindley opened on April 19, 1966, at Chester Assizes. The much-publicized case had aroused violent hatred among the general public. In prison, the couple had been held under permanent guard to protect them from other prisoners. Their food had been tested for poison, and in the courtroom, the dock was enclosed in bulletproof glass. Both refused to swear on the Bible, protesting that they were atheists, and both pleaded not guilty. They continued to deny all the charges and tried to put the blame on David Smith, who appeared as chief prosecution witness. In his summing up, the judge said, "If what the prosecution has said is right, then you are dealing with 2 sadistic killers of the utmost depravity." The jury took only 4 hours to agree. Brady was found guilty of all 3 murders, Hindley for the killing of Leslie Ann and Evans, and harboring Brady after his murder of John Kilbride. Both were committed to imprisonment for life, and Brady was later transferred to Broadmoor Maximum Security Mental Hospital. The case continued to evoke wide interest, particularly as 2 bodies had not been found. It was not until 1985 that an investigative journalist obtained a series of interviews with Brady in Broadmoor, in which the killer admitted his crimes for the first time and confessed to the murders of Pauline Reed and Keith Bennett. On learning this, the head of Manchester CID, Detective Chief Superintendent Peter Topping, wondered if it was possible to reopen the case. He visited Myra Hindley in prison and showed her many of the photographs of moorland taken by Brady. She said that after 20 years, she could not recognize any of the scenes, but offered to go with police to Saddleworth Moor. A new search of the moor began on November 20, 1986. Then, on December 16th, Topping received permission to take Hindley to the site. Heavily disguised and accompanied by an armed escort, she trudged about the moor in driving snow, but failed to identify any landmarks and was duly returned to prison. Topping continued to talk with Hindley, and at last, in February 1987, after 2 decades of maintaining her innocence, she announced that she would tell her story and recorded 17 hours of terrible truth. Again she was taken to the moor, and again the search was fruitless. However, the police now called upon the advice of experts, who explained how disturbed soil could be spotted from changes in the pattern of vegetation. The RAF photographed the whole area from the air so that it could be compared with Brady's photographs, and Topping went to talk with Brady. On July 1st, 1987, a search team spotted a telltale difference in a patch of vegetation and, after carefully excavating the site, exposed the body of Pauline Reed. When the find was announced, Brady contacted the chief superintendent and said he could show where Keith Bennett lay buried. For the whole of July 3rd, Brady tramped the moor with his police escort, but failed to find the spot. He was taken back to the moor on December 8th, but without success, and the search for Keith's body was finally called off. It has never been discovered, and Brady remains in Broadmoor. Hindley's case for parole was championed by Lord Longford, often to much press and public derision. From prison, she had gained an Open University degree, but in 1994 she still described herself as being wicked and evil and as having behaved monstrously. In 1998, the appeal court judges upheld the decision by the former UK Home Secretary Jack Straw that Hindley should stay in prison until she died, unless there were exceptional reasons to review the sentence. Hindley lost her battle for parole. In 2000, she took her case to the House of Lords, but again failed when 5 law lords unanimously ruled that the former Home Secretary's decision had been lawful and justified. Myra Hindley died in hospital in November 2002 following a chest infection. She was 60 years of age.